Rachel Martinez was having the worst morning of her life. Her daughter Mia couldn't find her favorite shoes anywhere, and her son Noah had woken up with a fever that turned out to be nothing more than his dramatic way of saying he didn't want her to leave. The babysitter, sweet old Mrs. Patterson, had gotten stuck in traffic and arrived 40 minutes late. By the time Rachel finally got into her car, she was already running an hour behind schedule for her cousin Sophia's wedding reception. She caught a glimpse of herself in the rearview mirror and sighed. Her blue dress was nice enough, bought on sale 3 months ago specifically for this occasion, but it had wrinkles from being stuffed in the back of her closet. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun because she'd run out of time to do anything fancy. This was supposed to be her one day to feel like a regular person, instead of an exhausted single mom who worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. The Grand Plaza Hotel was enormous, with marble columns and golden doors that made Rachel feel small. She'd never been anywhere this fancy in her entire life. Her worn black purse suddenly felt embarrassing as she walked past women carrying designer handbags. She checked her phone again, looking for Sophia's text about which room the reception was in, but the message wouldn't load. Her phone was ancient and barely worked anymore. She saw signs pointing to the Imperial Ballroom and figured that had to be it. Sophia had mentioned something about an imperial theme, or was it vintage? Rachel couldn't remember. Everything about this morning had been such a blur. She just wanted to show her face, congratulate Sophia, maybe eat some fancy food she'd never be able to afford otherwise, and then get back home to her kids. The moment she pushed open the ballroom doors, her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just fancy. This was the kind of wedding you see in movies. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks. White flowers covered every surface, their scent so strong it almost made her dizzy. The guests wore clothes that probably cost more than Rachel made in 6 months. She immediately wanted to turn around and leave, but then she spotted what looked like her Aunt Carmen's purple hat near the refreshment table. Rachel had always teased her aunt about that hat, how she wore it to every family event no matter what. Feeling relieved, she made her way through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a waiter who moved past her with a silver tray. She'd never had champagne before. It tickled her nose and tasted like expensive bubbles. On the other side of the ballroom, Alexander Hayes stood next to his bride, Victoria Ashford, greeting what felt like the 1,000th guest of the evening. He was tired of smiling, tired of shaking hands, tired of pretending this was the happiest day of his life. At 34 years old, Alexander had built a technology company from absolutely nothing, turning it into a billion-dollar empire. But standing here in his expensive suit, he felt like a fraud. His engagement to Victoria wasn't about love. Both of them knew it. Their families had known each other for decades, and joining the Hayes and Ashford fortunes just made good business sense. Victoria was beautiful and smart and perfectly pleasant. She was also about as warm as a business contract. They'd have a nice life together, he supposed. Comfortable, predictable, empty. Alexander's eyes wandered across the ballroom, looking for any excuse to escape the reception line for just a minute. That's when he saw her, a woman in a simple blue dress that stood out precisely because it was so ordinary among all the designer gowns. She looked nervous and out of place, clutching a phone and showing something on the screen to another guest. He couldn't explain what made him look closer. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was fate. But when his eyes focused on her phone screen, his entire world stopped spinning. 2 children stared back at him from that tiny screen. Twins. A boy and a girl who couldn't be more than 5 years old. They had dark curly hair and bright distinctive green eyes that looked exactly like the ones Alexander saw in the mirror every single morning. The champagne glass slipped from his hand before he even realized it. The crystal shattered against the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. Every conversation in the ballroom stopped. 300 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. Victoria grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. "Alex, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" But Alexander couldn't hear her. His mind had traveled back 6 years to a charity event in Boston. He'd been there representing his company, bored out of his mind when he'd struck up a conversation with one of the catering staff during her break. She'd been a graduate student working 3 jobs to pay her tuition. They'd talked for hours about everything and nothing. She'd quoted poetry at 3 in the morning and laughed at his terrible jokes. For the first time in his life, someone had seen him as just a person, not as Alexander Hayes, the billionaire. They'd spent one perfect night together. When he woke up the next morning, she was gone. No note. No phone number. Nothing. He'd spent months trying to find her, had even hired investigators, but she'd disappeared like smoke. Eventually, he'd given up and convinced himself it was just a beautiful memory. He'd gotten engaged to Victoria the first time, then called it off, and now here he was trying again. But those children, those eyes, that face that looked so much like his own baby pictures that his mother kept in albums. Rachel finally realized something was very wrong. The woman she'd been talking to, the one she'd thought was her Aunt Carmen, was looking at her like she'd grown a second head. "I'm sorry, dear, but I don't know anyone named Sophia. This is the Hayes Ashford wedding." The blood drained from Rachel's face. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and looked at Sophia's text message again. The one that had finally loaded. Imperial Garden venue, not Imperial Ballroom. She was at the completely wrong wedding. She'd crashed a stranger's wedding, drunk their champagne, and talked to their guests like she belonged there. "I have to go," Rachel stammered, backing toward the doors. "I'm so sorry, this is a huge mistake." "Wait." The voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a knife. Rachel turned to see a tall man in a perfect black suit pushing through the guests. His green eyes were locked on her with an intensity that made her want to run. "Those children in your photo, how old are they?" Rachel's heart stopped. She knew those eyes. She'd seen them 6 years ago on a man who'd made her feel special for one night before she'd slipped away at dawn. Too afraid to face the morning, she'd seen them in magazines and news articles later, when she'd discovered that the kind stranger from the charity event was actually Alexander Hayes, one of the richest men in the country. She'd seen them every single day for the past 5 years when she woke up her twins for breakfast. "I need to leave," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please." Alexander was closer now, his voice urgent and desperate. "Tell me, are they 5 years old?" A beautiful blonde woman appeared at his side, wearing a wedding dress that probably cost more than Rachel's car. "Alexander, what on earth is happening?" Our guests are staring. But Alexander wasn't listening. His eyes were still fixed on Rachel, pleading for an answer to a question that would change everything. Rachel felt the weight of 300 wealthy strangers watching her fall apart. She saw security guards moving toward her from the corners of the room. The walls felt like they were closing in. She did the only thing her panicked brain could think of. She ran. Her heels clicked frantically against the marble floor as she pushed through the ballroom doors and sprinted toward the elevator. Behind her, she could hear Alexander calling out, hear the confusion and chaos erupting in the ballroom. She stabbed at the elevator button over and over, and when the doors finally opened, she dove inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the elevator descended, Rachel pulled out her phone with trembling hands and called Mrs. Patterson. "I need you to take Noah and Mia to your sister's house in Connecticut, tonight, right now." "I can't explain, just please do this for me." The elderly woman's concerned voice came through the speaker. "Rachel, honey, what's wrong? Are you in trouble?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted, tears streaming down her face. "But I need my baby somewhere safe, please." When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, Rachel ran past the doorman and into the parking lot. She didn't look back. She couldn't look back. Because if she did, she'd have to face the truth she'd been running from for 5 years. Alexander Hayes was the father of her children, and now he knew they existed. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She sat on her worn couch in her tiny apartment, staring at the shoebox she'd pulled from the back of her closet. Inside was a single white handkerchief with the initials AH embroidered in gold thread. It was the only thing she'd kept from that night 6 years ago, back when she'd been a struggling graduate student who thought magic was real for exactly 12 hours. She remembered every detail of that night, how Alexander had been standing alone on a balcony, looking tired and sad despite his expensive suit, how they'd talked about books and dreams and all the things people usually hide behind small talk. He'd made her laugh. He'd listened when she talked about wanting to become a nurse but having to drop out because she couldn't afford tuition anymore. For one night, she'd felt like Cinderella at the ball. But unlike Cinderella, Rachel had run away before midnight because she was afraid that the morning light would show him who she really was. A girl from the wrong side of town with holes in her shoes and student loans she'd never be able to pay back. So she'd slipped out at dawn, leaving only that handkerchief behind by accident. 3 months later, she discovered she was pregnant. She'd tried to find him, asking around at the catering company, but they'd only known him as a guest speaker. By the time she saw his face on the cover of a business magazine, she was 7 months pregnant with twins. The article talked about his engagement to Victoria Ashford, calling it the merger of two powerful dynasties. Rachel had cried for 3 days straight. Then she'd made a decision. A man like Alexander Hayes didn't need the complication of a poor nobody showing up with babies. He had his perfect life planned out. She wouldn't be the person who ruined it. Her children would have her love, and that would be enough. Except now he knew. And nothing would ever be the same. Her phone buzzed at 6 in the morning. An unknown number. Rachel stared at it, her heart pounding. She let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately. And again. On the 4th call, she finally answered. "Hello?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Rachel Martinez, it wasn't a question. Alexander's voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept either. "We need to talk. How did you get this number?" "That doesn't matter right now." He paused, and she heard him take a shaky breath. "Are they mine?" "Noah and Mia. I need to hear you say it." Rachel closed her eyes. 5 years of secret-keeping came crashing down with one word. "Yes." The silence on the other end stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. Then she heard what sounded like a choked sob. 5 years, Alexander finally said. "You kept them from me for 5 years and you were engaged." Rachel's own tears started falling. What was I supposed to do? Show up at your office with my pregnant belly and ruin everything? You had Victoria. You had your perfect life all planned out. That engagement ended 3 months after it started the first time. Victoria and I have been on and off for years because neither of us actually wants to be together. His voice rose. "Did you really think so little of me? Did that night mean nothing to you?" "It meant everything," Rachel whispered. "That's exactly why I left. Because I was falling for you, and I knew a man like you could never want a life with someone like me. I was protecting my children from growing up with a father who would resent them for ruining his plans." "Resent them?" Alexander's laugh was bitter and painful. "Rachel, I have everything money can buy, and I've been miserable for 6 years. I've compared every woman I've met to a ghost. And you think I would resent my own children?" Before Rachel could answer, she heard a car door slam outside her apartment. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. A black luxury car was parked on her street, completely out of place among the old sedans and rusty trucks. A man in a dark suit stood beside it, talking on his phone. "Are you having me watched?" Rachel's voice went cold. "I needed to make sure you and the children were safe," Alexander said. "After what happened at the wedding, the press is going crazy. There are photographers everywhere. I just wanted—" Rachel hung up. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. She immediately called Mrs. Patterson. "Are Noah and Mia okay? Has anyone come to the house?" "They're fine, dear. We're still at my sister's place in Connecticut. The children are asking about you, though. Mia wants to know when you're coming to get them. Keep them there. Please. I'll explain everything soon. I promise." Rachel called her supervisor at City General Hospital where she worked and took an emergency leave. Then she drove to Connecticut, checking her rearview mirror the entire way to make sure no one was following her. When she finally held her children in her arms, she broke down completely. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Noah asked, his little face worried. At 5 years old, he was already so protective, always trying to take care of everyone. "Are you sad?" Mia climbed into her lap, her green eyes so much like her father's that it made Rachel's heart ache. "I'm okay, babies. Mommy just had a long day." Rachel kissed both their heads, breathing in the smell of their strawberry shampoo. "I need to talk to you about something important. Do you remember when you asked me about your daddy?" Both children's eyes went wide. They'd asked questions over the years, especially when other kids at kindergarten talked about their fathers. Rachel had always been honest in the simplest way possible. "Your daddy didn't know about you, but I love you enough for 2 parents. Is he coming?" Mia asked, her voice full of hope that broke Rachel's heart. "It's complicated, sweetheart. But yes, he wants to meet you." Rachel looked at Mrs. Patterson helplessly. "I don't know what to do." The older woman sat down beside her and took her hand. "You do what's right for these children. Not what's easiest. Not what's safest. What's right." 3 days later, an official-looking envelope arrived by courier. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened it. Legal documents. Alexander was suing for joint custody and demanding a paternity test. The words blurred on the page as Rachel tried to read them. Phrases jumped out at her. Father's rights. Best interests of the children. Formal custody arrangement. She called the only lawyer she knew, her friend's cousin Tommy, who mostly handled traffic tickets and small claims. He came over that evening, read through the documents, and gave her the bad news with sympathetic eyes. "Rachel, I'm way out of my depth here. Alexander Hayes has the best family law attorneys in the country. You need someone who can actually fight back." He hesitated. "But honestly, these papers aren't asking for full custody. He's asking for rights as a father. Access to his kids. It's actually pretty reasonable considering." Reasonable. Rachel stood up, pacing her small living room. "He's trying to take my children." "No, he's trying to be their father." "There's a difference." Tommy gathered his papers. "Look, I know this is scary, but a judge is going to side with him on the paternity test. And once that comes back positive, you're going to have to share custody whether you like it or not. The question is whether you want to fight ugly or try to work something out." After Tommy left, Rachel sat in the darkness of her apartment. Through the wall, she could hear Noah and Mia giggling in their bedroom, playing some imaginary game. They were so innocent, so happy. How could she explain that their whole world was about to change? Her phone buzzed. Another text from Alexander's number. "Please, can we just talk? I don't want to do this through lawyers." Rachel typed and deleted responses 5 times before finally writing back. "Fine. Tomorrow. Coffee shop on Main Street at noon. Come alone." The next day, Rachel arrived at the coffee shop early and chose a table in the back corner. She wore jeans and an old sweater, her hair in a messy ponytail. No makeup. No pretending to be anything she wasn't. When Alexander walked in, he looked different from the polished billionaire at the wedding. He wore regular jeans and a simple jacket. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. He sat down across from her without ordering anything. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. "I'm sorry," they both said at the same time. Alexander shook his head. "No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have sent lawyers after you. I was angry and hurt, and I wasn't thinking about what's best for Noah and Mia. I was only thinking about myself." Rachel wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I'm sorry I never told you. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, protecting everyone. But really I was just scared. Scared of what?" "Of you," Rachel admitted. "Of your money, your power, your whole different world. I was scared you'd take them away from me, or that they'd grow up ashamed of their poor mother who works at a hospital and lives in a tiny apartment." Alexander reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "I don't care about any of that. I never did. That night 6 years ago, you talked to me like I was just a person. Do you know how rare that is? Everyone wants something from me. Money, connections, opportunities. But you just wanted to talk about books and dreams." His voice cracked. "I've been looking for you for 6 years, Rachel. And now I find out we have children together, and I've missed everything." "First words, first steps, birthdays. They ask about you," Rachel said quietly. "Noah wants to know if you're tall like him. Mia wants to know if you like stuffed animals. They see other kids with dads and they wonder why they don't have one. Then let me be their dad." Alexander's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not trying to take them from you. I just want to be part of their lives, please. We can figure this out, together." Rachel looked at this man who could buy anything in the world but was sitting in a cheap coffee shop begging for a chance to know his children. She thought about Noah's questions and Mia's hopes. She thought about what Mrs. Patterson had said. "Do what's right, not what's easiest." "Okay," Rachel finally said, "but we do this slowly. On my terms. You don't get to sweep in with your money and completely change their lives overnight. They're my babies first." "Our babies," Alexander said softly. "But yes, your terms. Whatever you need." As they sat in that coffee shop making plans, neither of them noticed the photographer outside, snapping pictures through the window. By evening, the photos would be everywhere. Secret love child scandal. Billionaire's hidden family revealed. The battle was just beginning. Rachel's phone started ringing at 5 in the morning. Her sister Gabriella was calling, her voice frantic. "Rachel, turn on the news. Right now." With shaking hands, Rachel grabbed the remote and turned on the television. Her face stared back at her from every channel. The coffee shop photos were everywhere. Headlines screamed across the screen. "Billionaire's secret children. Alexander Hayes' hidden family exposed. Mystery woman and the 5-year cover-up." Her phone exploded with notifications. Text messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Friend requests from strangers. News outlets requesting interviews. Her address, her workplace, even photos of Noah and Mia from her private social media were being shared everywhere. "Mommy?" Mia appeared in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Why is your picture on TV?" Rachel quickly turned off the television and pulled her daughter close. "It's nothing, baby. Just some silly news stuff. Why don't you go wake up your brother? We're going to have pancakes for breakfast." But it wasn't nothing. By noon, there were 3 news vans parked outside Mrs. Patterson's sister's house in Connecticut. Photographers camped out on the sidewalk, shouting questions whenever anyone walked by. Rachel had to close all the curtains and keep the children inside, away from the windows. Noah pressed his face against the glass, watching the chaos outside. "Are we famous now?" he asked, his 5-year-old mind trying to make sense of it all. "No, sweetheart. This will all blow over soon." Rachel hoped she was telling the truth. Her phone rang again. This time it was Alexander. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Rachel, I'm so sorry." He sounded devastated. "I don't know how they got those photos. I swear I didn't tell anyone about our meeting." "It doesn't matter now," Rachel said, watching another camera crew pull up outside. "The whole world knows. My children can't even play in their own yard because there are strangers taking pictures of them. I'm sending security. They'll keep the photographers away from you and the kids." "I don't want your security." Rachel's voice rose. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your world is crashing into ours and my babies are caught in the middle. Then let me help, please. I have a house outside the city, completely private, gated property. You and the children can stay there until this dies down. No cameras, no reporters, just peace and quiet." Rachel wanted to say no. She wanted to prove she could handle this on her own. But then Mia started crying because she couldn't go outside to play, and Noah asked if the people outside were going to hurt them. Rachel swallowed her pride. "Fine, but just until things calm down. This doesn't change anything between us." "I understand," Alexander said quietly. "I'll have my driver pick you up in an hour." The back entrance, away from the cameras. The house Alexander sent them to wasn't just a house. It was practically a palace with tall gates and security guards who kept everyone away. Rachel felt uncomfortable the moment she walked through the front door. Everything was too clean, too perfect, too expensive. The children's eyes went wide as they explored rooms bigger than their entire apartment. "Mommy, look! They have a movie theater." Noah ran from room to room, his earlier fear forgotten in the excitement. Mia found a piano in the living room and carefully pressed one key. The beautiful note echoed through the house. "Can I learn to play?" she asked, her green eyes hopeful. "We'll see, baby." Rachel felt exhausted. She'd spent the last week running on fear and coffee. Now, standing in this mansion, she felt more lost than ever. Alexander arrived that evening with grocery bags full of food. He'd researched what 5-year-olds like to eat, but he'd clearly never actually fed children before. He'd bought 3 different types of chicken nuggets, 5 boxes of mac and cheese, and an entire shelf's worth of juice boxes. "I wasn't sure what they liked," he admitted, looking embarrassed as he unpacked everything. Despite herself, Rachel laughed. It was the first time she'd laughed in days. "This is enough food for a month. Better too much than too little." Alexander smiled, then his expression turned serious. "Rachel, we need to talk about what happens next. The media attention isn't going away. Victoria's family is threatening legal action. My mother wants to meet the children, and the paternity test is scheduled for next week." "I know the test will prove you're their father," Rachel said, helping him put groceries away. "I'm not fighting that anymore. But I need you to understand something. Noah and Mia are good kids. They're happy kids. They don't know about money or society pages or any of this craziness. I won't let your world destroy their childhood." "Our world," Alexander corrected gently. "Whether we like it or not, they're part of my world now too. But that doesn't mean they have to lose what makes them happy." He paused. "Can I meet them? Properly this time, not through lawyers or news cameras. Just as their father." Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. This was the moment she'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "They're in the backyard, playing on the swing set your security team somehow installed in the last 3 hours." "I called ahead," Alexander admitted. "I wanted them to have something fun here." They walked outside together. Noah was pushing Mia on the swing, making her squeal with laughter. When they saw the adults approaching, both children stopped playing and stared at Alexander with curious eyes. Rachel knelt down between her children. "Noah, Mia, remember how I told you that your daddy wanted to meet you? Well, this is him. This is Alexander. Alexander crouched down to their level and Rachel saw his hands trembling. Hi, he said softly. You can call me Alex if you want. Or Dad, or nothing at all. Whatever makes you comfortable. Mia, always the braver twin, stepped forward first. She studied Alexander's face carefully, comparing it to her own reflection she'd seen in mirrors. You have my eyes, she said matter-of-factly. You have my eyes, Alexander corrected, his voice thick with emotion. And they're beautiful. Noah hung back, protective and suspicious. Mommy says you didn't know about us. How come? Rachel tensed, but Alexander answered honestly. Your mom and I met a long time ago and I didn't know she was going to have you. If I had known, I would have been there from the very beginning. I'm sorry I missed so much of your life. But I'm here now and I want to know everything about you both. Do you like dinosaurs? Noah asked, testing him. I love dinosaurs, especially the T-Rex. Wrong answer, Noah said seriously. Velociraptors are way cooler because they hunt in packs. Alexander nodded with equal seriousness. You know what? You're absolutely right. I changed my answer to velociraptors. Mia pulled on Alexander's sleeve. I have a stuffed bunny named Mr. Hoppers. Do you want to meet him? I would love to meet Mr. Hoppers, Alexander said, and Rachel saw tears in his eyes. The next few hours were awkward and sweet and painful all at once. Alexander sat through a tea party with Mia's stuffed animals, listened to Noah explain his rock collection in excruciating detail, and looked more genuinely happy than Rachel had ever seen him. The polished billionaire disappeared, replaced by a man who laughed when Mia spilled juice on his expensive shoes and didn't mind when Noah used his tie as a cape for a superhero game. Rachel watched from the kitchen window, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. This was what she'd been afraid of. Not that Alexander would be a bad father, but that he'd be a good one. That Noah and Mia would love him. That she'd have to share them. Later that night, after the children were asleep in their new temporary bedrooms, Rachel and Alexander sat on the back porch. The property was so far from the city that they could actually see stars. They're amazing, Alexander said quietly. Smart and funny and so full of life. You did an incredible job raising them, Rachel. I had help. Mrs. Patterson, my sister, my mom before she passed. It takes a village. I want to be part of that village. Alexander turned to look at her. I know you don't trust me yet. I know you think I'm going to hurt them or change everything. But I'm asking you to give me a chance. Not as a billionaire or some guy from the news. Just as Alex, their father, who wants to be there for his kids. Before Rachel could answer, her phone buzzed with a news alert. She looked at the screen and felt her blood run cold. The headline read, Victoria Ashford speaks out. He chose his mistake over our future. The article detailed Victoria's tearful interview, calling Noah and Mia the product of a reckless affair, and claiming Alexander had abandoned his responsibilities to his real family. The comments section was already filling up with people taking sides. Some supported Victoria, others called her cruel for attacking innocent children. I'll handle Victoria, Alexander said, his jaw tight with anger. She has no right to talk about our children that way. Our children are being called a mistake on national television, Rachel said, her voice breaking. How are we supposed to protect them from this? They're 5 years old, Alexander. 5. And the whole world is judging them for something they had no control over. Alexander moved closer, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. We protect them together. We show them that what matters isn't what strangers say. What matters is that they're loved. By you, by me, by everyone who actually knows them. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple at all. Alexander finally took her hand. But we're in this together now. Like it or not, we're a team. For them. Rachel looked at their joined hands and thought about how much had changed in 1 week. She'd gone from running away at a wedding to sitting in a mansion holding hands with a billionaire who was the father of her children. Nothing about this was normal or simple or what she'd planned. But when she'd peeked in on Noah and Mia before coming outside, they'd both been smiling in their sleep. And for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't carrying the weight of parenthood completely alone. Okay, Rachel said finally. We're a team. But if you hurt them, billionaire or not, I will make your life miserable. Alexander smiled, real and genuine. I would expect nothing less. Inside the house, neither of them heard Mia wake up from a dream. The little girl padded to her brother's room and climbed into bed with him, something she did whenever she was scared or confused. "Noah," she whispered, "is our daddy going to stay this time?" Noah, already half asleep again, mumbled back, "I think so." He knew velociraptors were cool. That's a good sign. Satisfied with this logic, Mia closed her eyes and fell back asleep, dreaming of a family that was finally complete. The paternity test results arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered in a plain manila envelope. Rachel held it in her hands for 10 minutes before opening it, even though everyone already knew what it would say. Alexander Hayes was definitively the biological father of Noah and Mia Martinez. The words on the paper made it official, legal, unchangeable. Alexander was there when she opened it. They'd fallen into an unexpected routine over the past 2 weeks. He'd come to the house every morning before work, have breakfast with the children, and return every evening for dinner. He'd learned that Noah liked his toast cut diagonally, and that Mia refused to eat anything green unless you called it princess food. "What happens now?" Rachel asked, setting the paper down on the kitchen counter. "Now we figure out custody arrangements. My lawyers want to push for 50-50 alternating weeks." Alexander poured himself coffee, looking uncomfortable. "But I told them no." Rachel's head snapped up. "What? I've been watching you with them. The way Mia crawls into your bed when she has nightmares. How Noah tells you every single detail of his day. Even the boring parts. They need you, Rachel. You're their home." He sat down across from her. "I don't want to drag them between 2 houses like luggage. I want something different." "Different how?" Alexander took a deep breath. "Move in with me. Not here at this house, somewhere new. A place we choose together. Big enough for all of us. But comfortable. Normal. The kids keep their routine, their stability, and I get to be part of their daily lives instead of just a weekend visitor." Rachel stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "You want us to live together? We barely know each other, Alexander. That night 6 years ago doesn't count. These past 2 weeks don't count. You can't just decide we're playing house because it's convenient. It's not about convenience. It's about them." Alexander gestured toward the backyard where Noah and Mia were playing. In a traditional custody split, they'd have 2 bedrooms, 2 sets of toys, 2 different rules. They'd spend half their time missing the other parent. Is that really what's best? And what happens when you meet someone? When you want to get married for real this time? Then what? Rachel stood up, pacing. "I won't be the awkward ex living in your house while you build a life with someone else. I'm not thinking about anyone else. I'm thinking about our kids. Stop saying our kids like we're a couple." Rachel's voice rose. "We're not together, Alexander. We're just 2 people who share children. That's it." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of the children's laughter outside. Alexander rubbed his face, looking exhausted. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm pushing too hard, too fast. I just keep thinking about all the time I already lost, and I'm desperate not to lose any more." Rachel felt her anger deflate. She understood that desperation. She'd felt it every time the rent was late, every time she had to tell the kids they couldn't afford something other children had. Different reasons, same fear of failing the people you love most. "What if we try something smaller first?" Rachel suggested. "You find a place nearby, close enough that the kids can go back and forth easily, but separate. We learn how to co-parent before we make any big decisions about living situations." Alexander nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll try it your way." But trying it Rachel's way proved harder than either of them expected. Victoria's family launched a public relations campaign painting Alexander as an irresponsible playboy. His mother, Catherine Hayes, showed up unannounced at the house 3 days later, demanding to meet her grandchildren. Catherine was exactly what Rachel had feared. Tall, elegant, dripping with diamonds and disapproval. She looked at Rachel like something she'd scraped off her designer shoe. "So you're the woman who trapped my son." "I didn't trap anyone," Rachel said, blocking the doorway. "And you can't just show up here demanding things. Those children are Hayes' blood. I have a right to know them." Catherine tried to push past her, but Rachel stood firm. "They're also Martinez blood, and right now they're scared, confused kids who don't need more chaos in their lives." Rachel kept her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. "If you want to meet Noah and Mia, you do it properly. You call first, you wait for an invitation, and you treat their mother with respect. Or you don't meet them at all." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, girl. I could bury you in legal fees. I could take those children away and you'd never see them again. Try it." Rachel's voice went cold. I've been poor my whole life. I've worked 3 jobs while pregnant with twins. I've gone without food so my babies could eat. You think I'm scared of you because you have money? She stepped closer. I am their mother. I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee. You're just a stranger with a checkbook. So no, Mrs. Hayes, you don't get to bully your way into their lives. For a moment, the 2 women stared at each other. Then, surprisingly, Catherine's expression shifted into something almost like respect. You have spine. I'll give you that. She pulled out a business card. When you're ready, call me. But make it soon. Those children deserve to know their family, all of it, not just the parts you approve of. After Catherine left, Rachel's hands shook so badly she had to sit down. Alexander arrived an hour later to find her still on the couch staring at nothing. My mother was here, he said. It wasn't a question. How did you know? She called me, furious that some nobody had the audacity to refuse her entry. Alexander sat beside Rachel. She used other words too, but I'll spare you the details. What did you say to her? The truth, that she can't just steamroll into our lives because she's used to getting her way. Rachel looked at him. I know she's your mother. I know she's Noah and Mia's grandmother, but I won't let anyone, not even family, make my children feel less than our children, Alexander said softly. And you're right. My mother can be difficult, but she's also alone. My father died when I was young, and she poured everything into building the family business. Those kids are her only grandchildren. Under all that ice, she's desperate to know them. Then she needs to learn to ask nicely. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a strange new normal. Alexander found a house 10 minutes away, close enough for the kids to ride their bikes over. He enrolled in a parenting class, which Rachel found both amusing and touching. He showed up to every kindergarten event, often the only father in a sea of mothers. The media attention slowly died down as newer scandals took over the headlines. Noah and Mia adjusted to having a father with surprising ease. They spent weekday evenings with Rachel and weekend days with Alexander. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Then came the parent-teacher conference that changed everything. Rachel and Alexander sat side by side in tiny kindergarten chairs, while Mrs. Chen, the teacher, showed them Noah and Mia's artwork. They're both doing wonderfully, she said. But I wanted to talk to you about something Mia said during sharing time yesterday. She pulled out a drawing. It showed 4 stick figures holding hands. Mia told the class this is her family. Mommy, Daddy, Noah, and herself. Then another child asked why her mommy and daddy don't live in the same house if they're a family. What did Mia say? Rachel asked, her heart in her throat. She said, they don't love each other yet, but they love us, so maybe someday. Mrs. Chen smiled gently. I'm not telling you this to pressure you about your relationship. I'm telling you because these children are creating a narrative in their heads about what family means. They're 5. They don't understand complicated adult situations. They just know that other kids' parents live together and they're starting to wonder why theirs don't. After the conference, Rachel and Alexander sat in his car in the school parking lot, neither speaking. The drawing lay on the dashboard between them, 4 stick figures with big smiles. They think we're going to fall in love, Rachel finally said. Would that be so terrible? Alexander asked quietly. Rachel turned to look at him. Really look at him. Not as the billionaire who'd turned her life upside down. Not as the father of her children, but as Alexander, the man who'd learned to braid Mia's hair by watching YouTube videos at midnight, who'd memorized Noah's favorite dinosaur facts so they could talk about them, who'd somehow made her laugh even on the days when everything felt impossible. I don't know, Rachel admitted. 6 years ago, I fell for you in one night. It terrified me then, and it terrifies me now. Because what if we try and fail? It's not just us who get hurt. It's them. And what if we don't try at all? What if we spend the next 13 years tiptoeing around each other, being careful, playing it safe? Alexander reached over and took her hand. I'm not saying we have to decide today. I'm just saying maybe we stop pretending this is only about Noah and Mia. What are you saying? I'm saying that night 6 years ago wasn't just special for me because we have kids. It was special because of you, the way you laugh at bad jokes, the way you fight for what's right even when it's hard, the way you love those kids with everything you have. He squeezed her hand. I'm saying I'd like to take you on a real date. Just you and me. No lawyers or custody arrangements or media drama. Just 2 people getting to know each other. Rachel's first instinct was to say no. It was safer, simpler, less risky. But then she thought about Mia's drawing. About those four stick figures holding hands, about a 5-year-old's simple wish for her family to be complete. "One date," Rachel said. "But you have to ask Mrs. Patterson if she'll babysit, and you have to survive her interrogation first." Alexander laughed, the sound full of relief and hope. "I'll bring flowers and references." As they drove away from the school, neither of them noticed Noah watching from the kindergarten window, his hand pressed against the glass. He'd seen them holding hands. He'd seen them smile at each other. He turned to his sister, who was building blocks in the corner. "Mia," he whispered excitedly. "I think it's working." "What's working?" Mia asked, not looking up from her block tower. "Mom and Dad. They're starting to like each other. Just like you drew." Mia smiled, adding another block to her tower. "I told you my drawing was magic." Mrs. Patterson answered the door wearing her reading glasses and her most serious expression. Alexander stood on the doorstep holding a bouquet of flowers, looking more nervous than he'd ever been in any business meeting. "Mr. Hayes," she said, arms crossed, "Rachel tells me you want to take her on a date." "Yes, ma'am. This Friday evening, if you're available to watch Noah and Mia. Sit down." Mrs. Patterson pointed to the couch. "We need to talk first." For the next 30 minutes, the elderly woman grilled Alexander like a detective. What were his intentions? How did he plan to handle his high-profile lifestyle? Did he understand that Rachel had been hurt before and didn't trust easily? Alexander answered every question honestly, and by the end, Mrs. Patterson's stern expression had softened. "That girl worked herself to the bone raising those babies alone," she said quietly. She'd come home from double shifts so tired she could barely stand, but she'd still read bedtime stories and help with homework. She never complained, never asked for help, just kept going. Mrs. Patterson looked at Alexander directly. "If you're just playing around, if you're going to break her heart, you walk away right now. But if you're serious, if you really care about her, then you treat her like the treasure she is." "I will," Alexander promised. "I swear I will." Friday night arrived faster than Rachel expected. She stood in front of her closet, suddenly panicking about what to wear. Everything felt wrong. Too casual, too formal, too old, too trying too hard. She finally settled on a simple black dress, nothing fancy, just comfortable. When Alexander picked her up, he wasn't wearing a suit. Just nice jeans and a button-up shirt. He looked at her like she was wearing diamonds instead of a dress from a department store clearance rack. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up okay yourself." Rachel grabbed her purse, trying to ignore the butterflies in her stomach. They didn't go to some fancy restaurant downtown. Instead, Alexander drove them to a small Italian place on the edge of the city. The kind with red checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. The kind Rachel could actually picture herself eating at without feeling completely out of place. "How did you find this place?" Rachel asked as they were seated in a quiet corner. "I asked around. Asked people where they'd take someone if they wanted to impress them without being intimidating." Alexander smiled sheepishly. "I know my usual spots aren't exactly your style." Rachel felt something warm spread through her chest. He'd been thinking about what would make her comfortable, not what would show off his wealth. "Thank you. This is perfect." Over pasta and breadsticks they talked. Really talked like that night 6 years ago. Alexander told her about growing up with a mother who cared more about business than birthday parties. About building his company from nothing, because he wanted to prove he was worth something. Rachel told him about her own mother, who'd passed away 2 years ago, and how she still reached for the phone to call her when something good happened. She never got to see Noah and Mia start school, Rachel said, her voice catching. She would have loved that. She always said being a grandmother was going to be her greatest adventure. Alexander reached across the table and took her hand. "Tell me about her." "What was she like?" So Rachel did. She told stories about her mother's terrible cooking and wonderful hugs, about how she'd worked 2 jobs to send Rachel to college, about her laugh that could fill an entire room. And Alexander listened, really listened, like every word mattered. "She sounds amazing," Alexander said when Rachel finally ran out of stories. "I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you. Once she got past the whole billionaire thing and finished threatening you about treating her daughter right." Rachel smiled through her tears. She was a lot like Mrs. Patterson that way. They talked until the restaurant started closing around them. The owner, a friendly man named Giuseppe, packed up leftover tiramisu for them and winked at Rachel. "You bring him back, yes?" He looks at you like my Vincent looked at me for 50 years. In the car, Alexander didn't drive Rachel home right away. Instead, he took her to a park overlooking the city. They sat on a bench sharing the tiramisu straight from the container with plastic forks. "I want to tell you something," Alexander said, setting down his fork. "That night 6 years ago after you left, I looked for you everywhere. I went back to the venue every week for months, hoping you'd be working another event. I must have seemed like a crazy person." "Why?" Rachel asked. "It was just one night. Because I'd never felt that way before. Like I could be myself without any masks or expectations." He turned to face her. "And then I found you again, and you'd given me these incredible kids, and I thought maybe the universe was giving me a second chance. Not just to be a father, but to be with you." Rachel's heart pounded. "Alexander, I'm scared. What if we try this and it doesn't work? What if 6 months from now we can't stand each other, and Noah and Mia are caught in the middle of our mess? Then we figure it out like adults. We put them first like we've been doing." Alexander moved closer. "But what if it does work? What if we're actually great together? Don't we owe it to ourselves to find out?" Rachel looked at this man who'd learned to braid hair and memorize dinosaur facts, who'd stood up to his own mother for her, who'd chosen a small Italian restaurant over a 5-star experience because he wanted her to feel comfortable. She thought about Mia's drawing and Noah's hopeful questions and the way her heart beat faster every time Alexander walked into a room. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." Alexander's smile was brighter than all the city lights spread out below them. Yeah, but slowly. We have to be careful because of the kids." "As slow as you need," Alexander promised. Then gently, like he was afraid she might disappear again, he leaned in and kissed her. It was nothing like their first kiss 6 years ago, desperate and passionate in the darkness. This kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise. It tasted like tiramisu and new beginnings. 3 months later, Rachel stood in the kitchen of a new house. Not Alexander's mansion, not her tiny apartment, but something in between. A real home with a backyard big enough for Noah's soccer practice and a reading nook where Mia could curl up with her books. They'd picked it out together, arguing cheerfully about paint colors and room layouts. "Mommy, Daddy says we can get a dog." Noah came running in from the backyard covered in dirt. "Does he now?" Rachel raised an eyebrow at Alexander, who appeared in the doorway looking guilty. "I may have mentioned the possibility of a dog," he admitted. "In the distant future, maybe, if everyone agrees." "We want a big dog," Mia added, appearing beside her brother. "A really big one that can protect us." Rachel looked at her muddy children and the man she was slowly, carefully falling in love with. 6 months ago, her biggest worry was making rent on time. Now she was standing in a house they'd bought together, watching her children beg for a dog, planning a life she'd never dreamed possible. A medium-sized dog, Rachel negotiated, and only after we're all settled in. Both kids cheered and ran back outside. Alexander walked over and wrapped his arms around Rachel from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked quietly. "Terrified," Rachel admitted, "but also happy. Is that normal?" "I think that's love," Alexander said. "Being scared and happy at the same time." They stood there watching through the window as Noah and Mia played, already planning where the doghouse would go. Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson checking in, and another from Gabriella demanding pictures of the new house. Catherine Hayes had even come around slowly. She'd started by sending expensive gifts that Rachel had almost sent back, then gradually learned to ask before visiting. Just last week, she'd taken the kids to the park and actually played with them instead of just watching from a bench. Small steps, but steps forward. "You know what's funny?" Rachel said, turning in Alexander's arms. "If I hadn't gone to the wrong wedding that day, none of this would have happened." "Best mistake ever made," Alexander smiled. "Second best," Rachel corrected. "The best mistake was me leaving without saying goodbye 6 years ago. Because if I hadn't, we wouldn't have Noah and Mia. So what you're saying is we're good at making mistakes that work out." Rachel laughed and kissed him. "I guess we are." That evening, after the kids were in bed, Rachel found Alexander in what would become his home office, looking at something on his desk. It was Mia's drawing from school, the one with 4 stick figures holding hands. He'd framed it. "She was right, you know," Alexander said, noticing Rachel in the doorway. "Her magic drawing. She said we'd be a family, and we are." "We always were," Rachel said, coming to stand beside him. "We just had to figure it out." She thought about that morning 6 months ago when she'd run through the hotel in the wrong dress to the wrong wedding. She thought about the moment their eyes had met across that ballroom, how everything had changed in an instant. She thought about all the fear and fights and tears that came after. But mostly she thought about this moment. Standing in their home with the man she loved, their children safe and happy in their beds, a whole future stretching out before them. Sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Sometimes crashing the wrong wedding brings you to the right person. And sometimes, the best families are the ones you never planned but can't imagine living without. Rachel looked at the drawing one more time, at those 4 stick figures with their big smiles, and realized Mia had been right all along. Not about the magic, but about something more important. They were already a family. They just needed time to become one. And now finally they had all the time in the world.